You know, if there's one thing I've learned in my 50 years on this planet, it's that life has a way of teaching us lessons we never knew we needed, often at the most unexpected times. It's funny how we think we've got it all figured out when we're younger. In our 20s, we're invincible. In our 30s, we start feeling the pressure to settle down, get our lives in order. And by our 40s, we're juggling careers, families, and trying to keep it all together. Then 50 comes around, and it feels like someone hits pause. It's like standing on a mountain peak, looking back at the trail you've hiked every twist and turn, every wrong path you took, every breathtaking view you almost missed because you were too busy rushing to the top. And in that moment of stillness, you realize something that shakes you to your core. I regret that I found it out only at the age of 50. Perfection is a concept that many of us strive for, often without even realizing it. We want to be the perfect partner, the ideal parent, the most successful professional, and the most supportive friend. We set standards so high that they're nearly impossible to achieve, and yet we continue to chase them, believing that once we reach perfection, we will finally feel worthy, happy, and fulfilled. But what if the very thing we are chasing doesn't exist? What if perfection is nothing more than a myth, an illusion we've been conditioned to pursue? The truth is, the idea of perfection is rooted in the fear of inadequacy. We often believe that if we could just perfect our bodies, our careers, our homes, or our relationships, then we would be shielded from criticism, judgment, and the pain of rejection. Perfection becomes a form of self-protection, a way to try to control how others perceive us. If everything looks flawless from the outside, maybe no one will notice our insecurities, our mistakes, or the fact that we're often just trying to figure things out as we go along. But this relentless pursuit of perfection is exhausting and unsustainable. It keeps us trapped in a cycle of striving, achieving, and still feeling like we're never quite enough. In our attempt to be perfect, we often forget to be human. We hide behind masks, editing out the messy, raw parts of ourselves that make us who we are. We curate our lives for public display, showing only the highlights and concealing the struggles. But in doing so, we lose out on the genuine, deep connections that come from shared vulnerability. When we pretend to have it all together, we not only put immense pressure on ourselves, but also set unrealistic expectations for others. We create a culture where everyone feels the need to put up a facade, where imperfections are hidden, and where authentic connection is sacrificed for the illusion of flawlessness. This myth of perfection doesn't just affect our personal lives, it permeates our professional lives as well. In the workplace, many of us believe that we have to be the smartest, the most competent, and the most put together person in the room. Or we fear making mistakes because we equate them with failure. We worry that admitting we don't know something will make us look weak or incapable. So we overwork ourselves trying to meet impossible standards, sacrificing our mental and physical health in the process. We become so focused on the image of being perfect that we forget that true growth and innovation often come from taking risks, making mistakes, and learning from them. What's more, the pursuit of perfection often leads to procrastination. We become so afraid of producing something less than perfect that we end up not producing anything at all. We get stuck in analysis paralysis, endlessly refining and tweaking our work, convinced that it's not ready to be seen by the world. We become our own harshest critics, holding ourselves to standards we would never impose on anyone else. This constant self-criticism erodes our self-esteem and makes it difficult for us to appreciate our own accomplishments. We become so focused on what we could have done better that we fail to recognize and celebrate what we have done well. Perfectionism also stifles creativity. When we're obsessed with getting everything right, we play it safe, we stick to what we know, avoiding anything that might lead to failure or criticism. But creativity thrives in uncertainty and the willingness to explore new ideas and make mistakes along the way. Some of the greatest innovations in works of art have come from moments of imperfection, from experiments that didn't go as planned. It's in these moments of messiness and trial and error that true creativity is born. By striving for perfection, we limit ourselves, cutting off the potential for growth, discovery, and originality. The societal pressure to be perfect is amplified by social media, where we are constantly bombarded with images of seemingly perfect lives. We scroll through feeds filled with flawless photos of people who appear to have it all together, their immaculate homes, perfect bodies, smiling families, and exciting careers. It's easy to compare our behind the scenes moments with these carefully curated highlights and feel like we're falling short. But what we often forget is that social media is a highlight reel, not the full story. We're comparing our real lives with all their messiness and imperfections to an edited version of someone else's life. This comparison trap fuels our perfectionism and deepens our sense of inadequacy. In reality, perfection is unattainable because it's subjective. What one person considers perfect may be completely different from someone else's idea of perfection. It's an ever shifting goalpost, always just out of reach. And even if we do manage to achieve something we consider perfect, the satisfaction is fleeting. We quickly move on to the next thing we need to perfect, never allowing ourselves to truly savor our accomplishments. We end up chasing a moving target, always striving, but never arriving. The cost of this chase is high. It robs us of our joy, our creativity, and our sense of self-worth. It prevents us from taking risks, from trying new things, and from being fully present in our own lives. We become so focused on what we need to improve that we lose sight of all the things that are already good enough. We forget that being human means being imperfect. It means making mistakes, experiencing setbacks, and learning as we go. It means showing up as we are, flaws and all, and knowing that we are still worthy of love, connection, and belonging. The irony is that the more we strive for perfection, the further we push away the very things we desire most: connection, authenticity, and inner peace. When we embrace our imperfections, we give ourselves permission to be real. We allow ourselves to be seen, not as perfect beings, but as whole, complex, and beautifully flawed individuals. And in doing so, we open the door to a deeper, more meaningful experience of life. In the end, it's not perfection that makes us lovable or valuable. It's our willingness to show up, to be vulnerable, and to embrace the messiness of our human experience. The myth of perfection is just that, a myth. And the sooner we let go of it, the sooner we can start living fully and authentically. Vulnerability is one of those words that often carries a negative connotation. We tend to associate it with weakness, with exposing ourselves to harm or criticism. We've been taught that to be vulnerable is to be open to getting hurt. And because of this, we avoid it at all costs. We build walls, put on masks, and present ourselves in ways that we think will protect us from the judgments of others. But the truth is, vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It's a profound act of courage. It takes immense bravery to let our guard down, to be seen as we truly are, and to risk the emotional exposure that comes with showing up authentically. When we talk about vulnerability, we're really talking about the willingness to be open and honest, even when it feels uncomfortable. It's about sharing our deepest fears, our dreams, and our struggles without knowing how they will be received. It's the act of putting our true selves on the line with no guarantee of how others will respond. And that's where the courage comes in. It's easy to be strong and confident when we're hiding behind a facade, when we're only showing the parts of ourselves that we think are acceptable. But it takes real strength to be vulnerable, to allow ourselves to be seen in our entirety, including the parts we're not proud of or the parts we feel are unlovable. Vulnerability is the birthplace of genuine connection. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we open the door to true intimacy and understanding. Think about the moments when you felt the most connected to another person. It wasn't when you were both putting on a show of having it all together. It was when one of you shared something real, something raw. Maybe it was a fear, a regret, a hope, or a dream. It was in that moment of honesty that the walls came down and you saw each other for who you really are. That's the power of vulnerability. It allows us to see past the masks we wear and connect with the human being underneath. The paradox of vulnerability is that while it feels risky, it is also the source of our greatest strength. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we give ourselves the freedom to be fully human. We acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, that we make mistakes, and that we are imperfect. This acknowledgement is not a sign of defeat. It is a powerful declaration of our humanity. It says, I am willing to show up as I am, with all my flaws and imperfections, because I believe that who I am is enough. This kind of self-acceptance requires immense bravery. It takes courage to stand in front of others and say, here I am. This is me, take it or leave it. Many people fear vulnerability because they equate it with exposure to pain. And it's true that when we open ourselves up, we risk being hurt. We risk being rejected, judged, or misunderstood. But what we often fail to realize is that by avoiding vulnerability, we also close ourselves off from the potential for love, connection, and growth. We create barriers that keep us safe from pain, but also prevent us from experiencing the full range of human emotions. We end up living a muted version of our lives, one that is free from the sharpest pains, but also devoid of the most profound joys. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to act in spite of fear. And nowhere is this more true than in the realm of vulnerability. It is terrifying to tell someone you love them without knowing if they'll say it back. It is frightening to admit you need help or to share your struggles with mental health. It's daunting to put your creative work out into the world, not knowing if it will be praised or criticized. But every time we choose to be vulnerable in these ways, we are choosing courage. We are choosing to show up fully, to let ourselves be seen, and to embrace the uncertainty of not knowing what will happen next. In a world that often values invincibility, being vulnerable can feel counterintuitive. We are bombarded with messages that tell us to be strong, to push through, and to never let them see us sweat. We are taught to hold our emotions close, to keep our cards hidden, and to never show weakness. But this approach leaves us isolated. It creates a false sense of strength that is brittle and easily shattered. True strength comes from the willingness to be open, to admit when we're struggling, and to ask for help when we need it. It comes from recognizing that we are all in this human experience together and that no one is truly invincible. Being vulnerable means allowing ourselves to experience life fully, to embrace the highs and the lows, the joy and the pain. It's about standing in our truth, even when it's uncomfortable or scary. It's about sharing our authentic selves with the world and trusting that even if we are judged or rejected, we are still worthy of love and belonging. Setting boundaries is one of the most essential, yet often misunderstood aspects of maintaining healthy relationships and a balanced life. Many of us grow up with the idea that setting boundaries is selfish or that it pushes people away. We are taught to be accommodating, to say yes when we want to say no, and to prioritize the needs of others over our own. But the truth is, boundaries are not about building walls to keep people out. They are about creating a framework that defines how we want to be treated, what we will accept, and what is unacceptable. They are a crucial element of self-respect and self-care, enabling us to maintain our integrity and protect our mental and emotional well-being. One of the biggest misconceptions about boundaries is that they are about control. Many people think that setting boundaries means trying to control others' behavior or forcing them to meet our needs. But in reality, boundaries are about taking responsibility for our own actions and emotions. They are not about telling others what they can and cannot do. They are about clearly communicating what we need to feel safe, respected, and valued. Setting a boundary is not an attempt to manipulate or control someone else's behavior, but rather a way to take control of our own lives by defining what is and is not acceptable to us. Boundaries can be emotional, physical, or psychological, and they play a critical role in every aspect of our lives. In relationships, whether with family, friends, or romantic partners, boundaries help us establish a sense of self. They allow us to maintain our individuality even when we are closely connected with someone else. Without boundaries, we risk losing our sense of who we are, becoming enmeshed in others' needs and desires to the point that we forget our own. We might find ourselves constantly sacrificing our own well-being to make others happy, leading to feelings of resentment, frustration, and burnout. Healthy boundaries are necessary to ensure that we can love and care for others without neglecting our own needs in the process. In the workplace, boundaries are equally important. Many people struggle with the pressure to be constantly available, to say yes to every request, and to take on more than they can handle out of fear of disappointing others or appearing unprofessional.
This can lead to chronic stress, burnout, and a lack of work-life balance. Setting clear boundaries at work, such as defining your working hours, taking breaks, and delegating tasks when necessary, is crucial for maintaining productivity and well-being.
It's about recognizing that while you may want to be a team player and go above and beyond, you also have limits. And respecting those limits is key to sustaining your energy and effectiveness in the long term. The fear of setting boundaries often stems from a fear of conflict or rejection. We worry that if we set a boundary, the other person might get upset, take it personally, or even walk away. We fear being seen as difficult, demanding, or uncooperative. But the reality is that setting boundaries is a form of honesty. It is about being clear about what we can and cannot do, what we are comfortable with, and what our limits are. When we set boundaries, we are being truthful, not only with ourselves, but also with the people around us. And while this honesty can sometimes lead to uncomfortable conversations or conflict, it also creates a foundation of trust and respect in our relationships. People cannot read our minds, they cannot know our limits unless we communicate them. By setting boundaries, we are giving others the opportunity to respect our needs, which can lead to deeper, more authentic connections. Another important aspect of setting boundaries is understanding that they are not static, they can change over time. As we grow and our circumstances evolve, our boundaries may need to be adjusted. What felt acceptable at one point in our lives may no longer serve us in a new context. For example, we might have been okay with staying late at work regularly when we were younger, but as we take on more responsibilities outside of work, such as caring for a family, our priorities and limits may shift. Recognizing that boundaries are flexible allows us to adapt them to our current needs rather than feeling obligated to stick to old patterns that no longer align with our values. One of the greatest challenges in setting boundaries is dealing with the guilt that often accompanies it. Many of us have been conditioned to believe that prioritizing our own needs is selfish, and we may feel guilty for setting limits with people we care about. However, it's important to remember that setting boundaries is not about being selfish, it's about self care. When we set boundaries, we are taking care of our own well being, which in turn allows us to show up more fully for others. If we continually ignore our own needs and allow ourselves to be depleted, we won't have the energy or emotional capacity to be there for the people we love in a meaningful way. In this sense, setting boundaries is actually an act of kindness, both to ourselves and to those around us. Learning to set boundaries also involves learning to say no for many people. Saying no is one of the hardest things to do because we don't want to disappoint others or feel like we are letting them down. But saying no when we need to is an essential part of setting healthy boundaries. It's about acknowledging our own limits and recognizing that we cannot be everything to everyone. When we say no, we are not rejecting the person, we are simply honoring our own needs and capacity. And the more we practice saying no, the easier it becomes to do so with kindness and clarity without guilt or apology. Ultimately, setting boundaries is an act of self respect. It's about recognizing our own worth and treating ourselves with the same care and consideration that we offer to others. It's about taking ownership of our lives and making choices that align with our values, needs, and well being. While it may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we are not used to it, setting boundaries is a skill that can be learned and strengthened over time. And as we become more comfortable with setting boundaries, we find that our relationships improve, our stress decreases, and we begin to live in a way that is more authentic and true to ourselves. People pleasing is a behavior rooted in a deep seated desire to be liked, accepted, and validated by others. At its core, it's about prioritizing the needs and desires of others above our own, often at the expense of our own well being. For many, this habit develops early in life as a way to gain approval or avoid conflict. We learn that saying yes and going along with what others want brings praise and reduces the chances of confrontation. Over time, this becomes a default mode of interaction, where the fear of disappointment or rejection becomes so powerful that we constantly put our own needs on the back burner to accommodate everyone else. The danger of people pleasing lies in its insidious nature. It may appear harmless or even noble at first, after all. What's wrong with wanting to make others happy? However, consistently putting others' needs ahead of our own leads to a loss of identity. When we are constantly catering to the expectations and desires of others, we lose touch with our own values, desires, and boundaries. We become so focused on what others want from us that we forget to ask ourselves what we truly want. This disconnection from our own needs can result in a deep sense of dissatisfaction and unhappiness as we start living our lives according to others' expectations rather than our own. People pleasers often struggle with saying no, fearing that doing so will make them appear rude, selfish, or unkind. This fear stems from a belief that their worth is tied to their ability to please others. As a result, they find themselves saying yes to tasks, favors, and commitments they don't want to take on. They might agree to stay late at work, attend events they're not interested in, or help out with projects they don't have time for. Over time, this pattern leads to overwhelming stress and burnout. When we say yes to everything, we spread ourselves too thin, leaving little time or energy for the things that truly matter to us. The constant pressure to meet others' expectations can leave us feeling exhausted, resentful, and trapped in a cycle of obligation. Moreover, people pleasing often leads to a lack of authenticity in our relationships. By constantly trying to please others, we may find ourselves agreeing with opinions we don't actually hold or going along with decisions that don't align with our values. Uh, we might laugh at jokes we don't find funny, pretend to enjoy activities we dislike, or suppress our true feelings to avoid rocking the boat. This inauthenticity creates a barrier between us and the people we're trying to connect with. When we present a version of ourselves that is designed to please others rather than our true selves, we miss out on genuine connections. People may like the version of us that we're showing them, but it's not the real us they're connecting with. This leaves us feeling isolated and unfulfilled, even when we're surrounded by others. One of the most harmful effects of people pleasing is the erosion of our self worth. When we consistently put others' needs before our own, we send ourselves a message that our needs, desires, and feelings are less important. This can lead to a diminished sense of self-esteem as we come to believe that our value lies in what we can do for others rather than who we are as individuals. We start to measure our worth based on external validation, how many people like us, how often we're praised, and how much approval we receive. But this kind of validation is fleeting and unreliable. It leaves us constantly seeking more approval, like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. No matter how much praise we receive, it's never enough to truly satisfy us because we've lost touch with our own sense of intrinsic worth. The tendency to people please can also make us vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation. When we have a strong need to be liked and accepted, we may be more likely to tolerate disrespectful or unfair treatment. We might allow others to take advantage of our kindness, agreeing to tasks or favors that we're uncomfortable with simply because we don't want to upset anyone. We might stay in unhealthy relationships or toxic work environments because we're afraid of standing up for ourselves and risking disapproval. This pattern of behavior not only harms our mental and emotional health, but also sends a signal to others that we are willing to sacrifice our own needs for their comfort, which can lead to a cycle of continued mistreatment. People pleasing also stifles our ability to grow and assert ourselves. When we're focused on making everyone else happy, we don't have the space to explore our own passions, set our own goals, or pursue what truly matters to us. We become trapped in a cycle of seeking approval and meeting others' expectations, leaving little room for self-discovery or personal growth. We might have dreams and aspirations that we never pursue because we're too busy trying to live up to the expectations of others. This not only limits our potential, but also leads to a sense of regret and unfulfillment later in life. Breaking free from the habit of people pleasing requires a shift in mindset. It involves recognizing that our worth is not determined by how much we can do for others or how well we can meet their expectations. It requires us to start valuing our own needs and desires and to learn that it's okay to say no. Setting boundaries and learning to assert ourselves may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if we're used to putting others first. But it's a necessary step toward living a more authentic and fulfilling life. When we prioritize our own well-being, we create the space to show up more fully in our relationships, to pursue our own passions, and to live according to our own values. It's easy to feel like we've missed our chance in life, whether it's a career we didn't pursue, a dream we abandoned, or a path we strayed from. The feeling of regret can weigh heavily on us, especially as we get older. We might tell ourselves that it's too late, that the time for change is past, and that we should just accept where we are. But the truth is, it's never too late to start over. No matter our age, circumstances, or past mistakes, we always have the power to begin again, to redefine our lives, and to chase the dreams that still linger in our hearts. One of the biggest barriers to starting over is the fear of failure. We've been conditioned to believe that if we haven't achieved certain milestones by a specific age, we've somehow missed the boat. We might worry about what others will think or fear that we'll embarrass ourselves by starting something new at an inappropriate age. But this fear is often based on societal expectations rather than reality. The world is full of examples of people who have reinvented themselves later in life. From entrepreneurs who launched successful businesses in their 50s and 60s to artists who didn't start creating until after retirement, there are countless stories of individuals who defied the odds and chose to pursue their passions despite the passage of time. The idea that it's too late to start over is a myth that keeps us trapped in our comfort zones. It's a limiting belief that holds us back from exploring new opportunities and discovering what we're truly capable of. When we believe it's too late, we close ourselves off to the possibilities that life still has to offer. We settle for less, convincing ourselves that we should be satisfied with what we have, even if it doesn't make us happy. But the reality is, as long as we're alive, we have the capacity for growth and change. The only real barrier to starting over is our willingness to take that first step, to face the unknown, and to trust that we have the strength to make it happen. Starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. It's not about pretending that our previous choices, experiences, or setbacks didn't happen. Instead, it's about learning from those experiences and using them as a foundation for building something new. The beauty of starting over at any age is that we bring with us a wealth of life experience, wisdom, and perspective that we didn't have when we were younger. We have a clearer sense of who we are, what we want, and what truly matters to us. This knowledge can be a powerful tool as we set out on a new path. It allows us to make more informed decisions, to avoid the mistakes we've made in the past, and to pursue our goals with a greater sense of purpose and clarity. There's a misconception that starting over is a sign of failure, that it means we've wasted our time or made poor choices. But in reality, starting over is an act of bravery. It takes courage to admit that something isn't working and to take steps to change it. It takes strength to let go of the familiar and embrace the uncertainty of a new beginning. It's a declaration that we are not willing to settle for a life that doesn't fulfill us, that we believe we are worthy of pursuing our dreams, no matter how long it has taken us to get there. In this sense, starting over is not a setback, it's a powerful step forward toward living a life that is aligned with our true selves. The fear of the unknown can be paralyzing, especially when we're considering a major life change. We worry about the risks involved, the potential obstacles, and the possibility of failure. But what we often overlook is the risk of staying where we are, of continuing down a path that doesn't bring us joy or fulfillment. We forget the comfort of the familiar can be just as dangerous as the fear of the unknown, because it keeps us stuck in a life that isn't fully lived. When we choose to start over, we open ourselves up to new experiences, new opportunities, and new ways of being. We give ourselves the chance to create a life that feels authentic and meaningful. It's important to remember that starting over doesn't have to be a grand, dramatic gesture. It doesn't necessarily mean quitting our job, moving to a new city, or making a huge life change overnight. It can be as simple as taking a small step in a new direction, signing up for a class, starting a new hobby, or dedicating time each day to work on a passion project. These small steps can build momentum over time, gradually leading us toward the changes we want to see in our lives. The act of starting over is less about making a drastic change and more about making a conscious decision to move in a direction that feels right for us. We often underestimate our own resilience and capacity for change. We assume that because we've been on one path for so long, we can't possibly shift gears now. But humans are incredibly adaptable. We have the ability to learn new skills, develop new habits, and reinvent ourselves at any stage of life. It's never too late to follow a dream, to change careers, to learn something new, or to create a life that feels fulfilling and purposeful. The only thing standing in our way is the belief that it's too late. Once we let go of that belief, we open ourselves up to a world of possibilities. Starting over can be intimidating, but it's also an opportunity for growth, discovery, and transformation. It's a chance to let go of what no longer serves us and to embrace the things that do. It's an invitation to live more authentically, to align our actions with our values, and to pursue the things that truly make us happy. It's a reminder that life is not a linear path, but a journey full of twists, turns, and new beginnings. And no matter where we are on that journey, we always have the power to choose a new direction, to rewrite our story, and to create a life that reflects who we truly are. Regret is a powerful emotion, often accompanied by a sense of sadness, disappointment, and even grief over opportunities missed, choices made, or paths not taken. It can feel like a heavy burden lingering in the back of our minds and casting a shadow over our present moments. Many people view regret as something to be avoided at all costs, a sign that we've made mistakes or wasted time. But what if we shifted our perspective on regret? What if, instead of seeing it as a source of pain, we viewed it as a guide, a valuable tool that can help us make better decisions, learn from our experiences, and create a more fulfilling future? The first step in turning regret into a guide is acknowledging it. It's common for us to bury our regrets, pretending they don't exist or trying to distract ourselves from the discomfort they bring. We might tell ourselves to move on or get over it, thinking that confronting these feelings will only make things worse. However, ignoring regret doesn't make it disappear. It simply pushes it deeper into our subconscious, where it can continue to influence our thoughts and behaviors without us even realizing it. By acknowledging our regrets, we give ourselves the opportunity to understand them. We allow ourselves to sit with the discomfort and explore what it's really about. This process of reflection is essential because it helps us identify the unmet needs, desires, or values that are causing our feelings of regret. Regret often arises when our actions are misaligned with our core values or long-term goals. For example, we might regret not spending more time with loved ones because we value relationships and connection. We might feel regret over not pursuing a certain career path because we value personal fulfillment and growth. In this way, regret serves as a signal pointing us toward the aspects of our lives that matter most to us. Instead of viewing regret as evidence of failure, we can see it as a reflection of our deeper desires and values. It's a reminder of what is important to us and what we truly want out of life. By paying attention to these signals, we can use regret as a compass to help us navigate our future choices in a way that aligns more closely with our true selves. Turning regret into a guide also involves embracing a mindset of learning rather than judgment. It's easy to beat ourselves up over past decisions, to dwell on what we could have done differently, and to get stuck in a cycle of self-criticism. However, this kind of negative thinking doesn't serve us. It only keeps us trapped in the past. Instead of judging ourselves harshly, we can approach our regrets with curiosity and compassion. We can ask ourselves questions like, what can I learn from this experience? Or how can I use this insight to make better decisions in the future? By shifting from judgment to learning, we transform regret from a source of pain into a source of growth. One of the key benefits of using regret as a guide is that it can help us make more intentional choices moving forward. When we reflect on our regrets and identify the underlying desires they reveal, we can start making decisions that honor those desires. For example, if we regret not taking more risks in our career, this realization can inspire us to be more courageous in our future endeavors. If we regret not prioritizing our health, this awareness can motivate us to start making healthier choices today. In this way, regret becomes a catalyst for positive change, helping us create a life that aligns more closely with our values and aspirations. Regret can also be a powerful motivator for action. The discomfort of regret can serve as a wake-up call, reminding us that time is limited and that we have the power to make changes before it's too late. Instead of dwelling on what we wish we had done differently, we can use that energy to take steps toward the life we want to create. This might mean reaching out to someone we've lost touch with, starting a new project we've been putting off, or making a bold decision that aligns with our true desires. By taking action in response to our regrets, we shift our focus from what we've lost to what we can still gain, from the past to the future. It's also important to recognize that regret is a universal human experience. Everyone has moments in their life they wish they could do over, decisions they question, and opportunities they wish they had seized. This shared experience of regret can help us feel less alone in our struggles. It reminds us that making mistakes and facing regrets are part of what it means to be human. Instead of allowing regret to isolate us, we can use it as an opportunity to connect with others, to share our experiences, and to offer support and understanding. In this way, regret can foster empathy, helping us build deeper connections with those around us. Another crucial aspect of transforming regret into a guide is practicing self-forgiveness. Holding on to regret can lead to a cycle of shame and self-blame, which can be paralyzing and prevent us from moving forward. Forgiving ourselves for past mistakes is not about excusing our actions or pretending they didn't matter. It's about acknowledging that we did the best we could with the knowledge and resources we had at the time. Self-forgiveness allows us to release the heavy burden of regret and opens the door to new possibilities. It frees us to learn from our past without being defined by it. Finally, using regret as a guide encourages us to live more mindfully in the present. When we understand the pain of regret, we become more conscious of our choices in the here and now. We start to ask ourselves, will this decision bring me closer to the life I want to live, or further away? We become more attuned to our values and more intentional about how we spend our time. This heightened awareness helps us make decisions that we're less likely to regret in the future. It encourages us to take risks, to express our feelings, and to live in a way that feels true to who we are. In embracing regret as a guide, we transform it from a source of pain into a powerful tool for self awareness and growth. We learn to listen to the messages it holds, to extract the lessons it offers, and to use those insights to shape a more meaningful and intentional life. Rather than letting regret hold us back, we can let it propel us forward, guiding us toward a future that aligns with our deepest values and aspirations.